Whispering Woods is hit with a pretty big surprise. Genevieve Joyce is not only amazed to learn that a spectacled bear is arriving at the Haven, she is also stunned by the recent news from Silvercorp. Jeff Elliott, the company's top shareholder, has passed away, leaving his shares to his adult grandson, Liam. Even more surprising is that Liam Elliott happens to be an engineer with a background in environmental sciences, and is all about building things to be more green. With this interesting development, Arthur Joyce decides he will be staying in South America to see if Silvercorp's operations change with this news. Anna Kingston, who has been hard at work educating others, agrees to stay on until Jimena Alvarez, the organization leader, has fully recovered from her tree-related accident. Everyone seems to be holding their breath, waiting to learn what will happen next. Welcome back to Whispering Woods, Wildlife Haven. Hey everyone, Sparrow here. Thanks for joining me at Whispering Woods once more, where today we are building an enclosure for the spectacled bear. Here is their range out in the wild, just trying to figure out the rough estimate of how big this enclosure should be. We are only going to have one female bear in here because I decided that the bear would be sharing its enclosure with the Saki monkey, which we will have a lot more of. And before you tell me that bears eat monkeys, the spectacled bear is actually one of the most herbivorous bears. And spectacled bears and Saki monkeys, or capuchin monkeys, or coatis, or other herbivorous animals are actually kept together in many zoos worldwide. So I thought this was a very fun combination and something that maybe a lot of people in the Planet Zoo community haven't seen, especially if you're not super into research or zoos in real life. So that's why we ended up doing this combination. This did, however, come with the caveat that this zoo is now in sandbox. And the only reason why I'm okay with that is because we were getting to the point where loading in and all of the guests were making it so difficult to do any sort of cinematics in here. And that's not the kind of value I want to provide for my viewers, obviously. Like, a choppy cinematic is, let's face it, not fun to watch. So this is now a sandbox zoo. Thank you for that suggestion to one of my commenters. It means we don't have to worry about the funding, but we also don't have to worry about having too many guests in the zoo in order to fund these builds, which will be, again, a lot nicer. So if you're here for the challenge mode, I'm sorry. We did do that for 2.5 seasons. We're getting pretty close to the end of this zoo, so I am okay with changing it to sandbox just for the last couple of episodes, because otherwise we couldn't make this work. Because the bear would be trying to eat the monkeys, which in real life it wouldn't. So this allows us to turn predation off, and these two can coexist in this enclosure. So first things first, we're going to create some walls to make sure that these animals can't climb out. They are pretty sheer, made of plaster cones, and then I added some of the Oceania rock to the bottom just to give it a little bit more texture and help it blend in with the rocks that we're going to put on the ground. I believe Caesar Creates created something really similar in his raccoon dog video I think I saw, but I did do this before watching that video, so that was a funny coincidence. So we're gonna add mulch patches on top. This is going to be primarily planted with ferns and a whole bunch of other tropical foliage, just to give the enclosure a nicer backdrop than that wall behind there. And then we're going to sink more of the Oceania rock blocks down underneath the water. This is to create a little bit more texture. We'll be adding plenty of faux rocks to this as well. I find a lot of the time I end up defaulting to faux rocks, but you really don't need to. You can add other things, and these Oceania rocks are not only recolorable, but they do provide a very, very cool texture. Of course, the worst thing is not grouping things together and then having to group them in order to sink them down, but we make it work. And then I'm going to start off by placing my enrichment items. These are going to be pretty key in how these animals use the enclosure, so I want to get those down as soon as possible. We have some forage feeders, both tree and ground, because we do have 2 different species in here. So we have double the enrichment items really to think about. And this will help us lay out our enclosure a lot better. And then I'm going to work my way through the construction tab with the climbable filter on, just to see what items we can use to create some climbing structures, as both Saki monkeys and spectacled bears like to climb. So the smaller limbs, I think, are going to be only accessible by the Saki monkeys. The larger ones will be accessible by the bear as well. We do have to keep that in mind. Maybe the bear won't be able to climb everywhere. Hopefully it still satisfies its climbing need. I did keep the enclosure requirements on, even though this is now sandbox. This was actually my first attempt at creating a sort of more custom climbing structure. I had a lot of fun with this, I'm not gonna lie. It was a lot of moving around the camera, trying to get the angles correct, so I apologize if it does cause a little bit of motion sickness. I was trying really hard not to move around too much. But yeah, like, I didn't really have a reference photo for this. I just kind of put together what I felt would work, maybe. And then once I had that initial climbing structure in, I looked through the climbable trees that match the South American tropical environment, and those were the first trees I placed into the enclosure. I did want to keep the sightlines in mind. It is quite a long enclosure, so you want it to look nice from multiple angles. And I ended up deciding on this tamarind tree to sit over the water. It's going to provide some nice shade, give it a little bit more of an Amazon feel. I really like that log in the water as well. I thought that was a nice touch. And once that tree is in there, we're also going to put some rocks in, give this slope a little bit more meaning. It's not just dirt. This will be a little bit of a break from the climbing structures. We will be going back to them. I do have some more tips for that. But as far as rock walls go, as you can see, usually hide most of the rock in the ground. It's not really just slapping it down onto the surface of the ground. It's very much sinking everything in and then kind of stacking it up to give this more shale look. And we are back to climbing structures. This one here I created out of the bamboo, which is the construction tab, and the climbing logs that you can find in the habitat tab. This is because all of these items are traversable by the spectacled bear, which you see here, and so this climbing structure should be one of the ones that the spectacled bear spends more time on. Adding a little platform for the Saki monkeys. We'll have a little tennis ball up here just to get them to join the spectacled bear up there. And one thing I've been seeing a lot in both builds by other creators as well as inspiration photos. For those of you who are not sure where to find inspiration photos, ZooChat and Zoolex are absolutely amazing for that. But these sort of tire swings or tire elements that come off of the climbing structure seem to be really popular in a lot of zoos and a lot of builds, so I figured I'd add my own. I really love the way that looks. And into the enrichment forage feeder, I put a African oil palm, which fit perfectly into this enrichment item. I think it gives it a little bit more pizzazz, if you will. Don't think that's a word I've ever used, but there you go. Lots of custard apple trees. These are sunk into the ground as well to provide sort of a bush-like feel. Lots of Swiss cheese plants. We have some elephant ear. Lots of scaevola bushes, obviously. Like one of the only tropical ground covers that we have. So that's going to make up a lot of the habitat. Lots of giant rhubarb. We have a few different palm trees. We're trying to keep it quite tropical in here, very, very Amazon focused. And then of course we are going to put down buffalo grass since I do have the grass replacement mod. This will help to fill out the bare areas in between, slide that under the other bushes just to make it look a little bit more natural. And once I was done sort of the main layer, I had to do a little bit of placement on its own. Then we're going to dress up this back wall with some vines, gives people something to look at if they're looking at the water. Because of the plaster cone backdrop, it wasn't entirely flat, so I had to shimmy those pieces around to make it look a little bit more natural. And then we do have to think about the fact that these are climbing animals and they would be able to get over that wall very, very easily. So I set up this Oceania netting with the metal cables from the Zookeeper pack, and that is going to be our primary climbing barrier. And then I spent a bunch of time creating sort of this faux roof for the netting. So these cables will attach to the girders coming out of the wall, and that will be sort of the top of the enclosure. That's how high the animals can climb. Hopefully they can't get out. I don't feel like they would. And there we go. That's the top of the enclosure. The nice thing about this too is that I grouped all of the netting together, so you can either have the enclosure with the netting or without, whatever view you prefer. Finally, it's time to head over to the backstage area. This isn't going to be too in-depth, just a very small cage for the spectacled bear. We are going to divide this a little bit so that the Saki monkeys have a way to get away from the spectacled bear if they need to. And for that, what we're going to do is we're going to build them a second level. You can see I've divided that lower structure into 2 different cages. So the smaller one will be for just the monkeys. The bear cannot access that. And the monkeys can, either by climbing onto the roof and then down into the secondary cage, or there's a little hole in the wall that they can crawl through as well. Carrying on that idea of the fake roof with the metal cables, not about to mesh all of that over. But we are going to make sure that the monkeys can climb in here. This is one of the climbing pieces, just trying to make it look like it's resting in that crook. And the rest of the roof of the backstage is going to be covered in these tropical panels just to add some more greenery, as well as some air conducts so that it looks a little bit more realistic. I hope you enjoyed. This is the final enclosure for the spectacled bear and the Saki monkeys. This is probably one of my favorite enclosures in the South America Dome. I'm really enjoying the climbing structures. I think they turned out super well, and I love that the animals actually use them. This is obviously my first time building for both the spectacled bear and Saki monkey, and I absolutely love them. The models are so good, and their animations are so fun to watch. If you like this episode, make sure you leave me a like down below. Maybe comment your favorite portion. We do have 2 more animals to add to the South America Dome. Not sure if they'll be in the same episode. We'll see how things go. But hopefully the South America Dome will be finished soon and we can do a very nice tour of the premises. If you'd like to support me a little bit further, make sure you join the nest to see your name here on the members wall. Otherwise, I hope to see you next weekend. We will be continuing the South America Dome. Rising Sun is going to take a little bit more time to get together, but I promise you will still hear me next weekend. See you next time. Bye.